Are you prepared to spend an unplanned night in the backcountry? Are you confident that the gear that you have with you and your ability to use that gear will come through when you need it most? Today, I'm going to talk about the 10 essentials and what I take with me every time I go into the backcountry. A majority of my photography involves hiking into the backcountry. So whether you're a hiker or a photographer, the gear that you have with you is critically important. When I go into the backcountry, I usually either have a typical hiking backpack, like this Osprey Atmos 65, or I take a dedicated technical photo backpack, like this F-Stop Suka 70-liter pack. I'm going to open these packs up and talk to you about the 10 essentials. There are two ways to think about the 10 essentials. There is the classic list, which is map, compass, sunglasses and sunscreen, extra clothing, a headlamp, a first aid kit, matches, a fire starter, a knife, and extra food. And that is called the classic list because it's been around since the 1930s, and it was first introduced into the Mountaineers Freedom of the Hills version 3 in the early 1970s. Since then, it has evolved into the 10 essential systems, which I will talk about today. As I mentioned, I use both a technical photography backpack as well as a standard backpacking backpack. And it really depends on where I'm going and the amount of time that I'll be out as to which backpack I will choose. I do prefer, if I'm doing any photography, and weight is not a critical issue, I do prefer to take a technical photography backpack. There are many on the market. This is an F-Stop Suka, which is a 70-liter pack. I also have an F-Stop Talopa, which is a 50-liter pack. Now, the reason I choose these packs over some others is I do like the modularity. It is structured like a regular backpack. It has an access point in the back to access your camera gear and other hiking gear that you may have in the pack. The suspension system is first rate. It has a well-designed hip belt, but the real selling point for me is the fact that it has a top lid. There are other backpacks that have a different design, and there's no top lid. This is not a floating top lid like you would find on a regular backpack, and there is some drawback to that, but what I do like is it does have these modular attachment points, and so if I'm pressed for space, I can put a tent or a bedroll or even a camera with a long lens and strap it to the top of the pack, just like I would on a regular hiking backpack, putting it under the floating lid. The other reason I like a pocket on top is I keep all of my ready access, part of my 10 essentials, anything that I need to get to right away in the top of my backpack. Things like a headlamp, sunglasses, sunscreen, my compass, map, knife, etc. And I like to have those items readily available, and a top pocket is a perfect way to do that. So I've unloaded my backpack, and I talked to you earlier about the difference between the classic 10 essentials and what was introduced about 10 years ago, which are the 10 essential systems. I'm going to talk about it from a systems perspective because I think that is a more accurate way to think about how you use the 10 essentials and how it can protect you and potentially save your life. I'm going to list the 10 essential systems, and then I'm going to go through each one individually and talk about them. The first one is navigation, which is the historical map and compass and other things. The second is sun protection, or sunscreen, sunglasses, etc. The third is insulation, which is extra clothing and insulating you from the elements. The fourth is illumination, which is headlamp, light, etc. The fifth is first aid, a first aid kit and protecting yourself medically. The sixth is fire. The seventh is a repair kit or some type of a knife, depending on the type of equipment that you have with you. The eighth is nutrition and food. The ninth is hydration and water. And the 10th is some type of emergency shelter. So I'm going to start with the first one, which is navigation. And I have my navigation equipment right here. And so in the classic list, it talked about a map and compass, and I think we have to think about it a little bit more deeply depending on where we're going. Certainly, every time you go out, you should have a map in some type of a waterproof container, and also important is to have some kind of a pencil, because you need to have a map and compass. Here's a compass that I take with me, which is a standard Silva backcountry compass. I would highly recommend these versus the small little ones that you get in some kind of a survival kit or on the zipper pull of your backpack. Those small little round compasses are basically useless, and they will probably break when you need them most. In terms of map and compass, it's not only important that you have them, but that you know how to use them. So you should know the difference between magnetic and grid references. You should know how to calculate declination. You should know taking a bearing and dead reckoning, and some type of a pace count, because those are all essential skills when you're using a map and compass in the backcountry. In today's environment, we also have to think about new technology like a GPS. This is a Garmin inReach, which is a GPS receiver, but it's also a satellite communicator, and it's linked via Bluetooth to my cell phone. And so this gives me a precise location, provided that I have access to the sky, to the southern sky, to the satellites. These use GPS satellites, which are in a geosynchronous orbit, which is, I think, about 20,000 miles out above the equator. So in the northern hemisphere, you do have to have a clear view of the southern sky. And it's linked to my phone, so it gives me a real-time position on a map on my phone, and it comes in really handy, provided, again, that I have access to the sky and I'm not under a canopy or deep in a valley. The other third dimension of navigation is an altimeter. And when I go out, I always have my Garmin Fenix 5X GPS watch. This is not only a GPS watch, but it's also a pressure-sensitive altimeter, and it tells me my altitude or my elevation on the map. So it gives me a third dimension of reference when I'm trying to calculate or determine my position on a map. So the second of the 10 essential systems is sun protection, and that is sunglasses, sunscreen, and I like to think of sun protection as really environmental protection. So when you're heading out, you have a pair of sunglasses. It's sunny today, so maybe I'll put these on. But depending on where you're going, if you're going to a snowfield, or if you're going to a glacier in the summertime or in the wintertime, the light that comes off, that's reflected off of a snowfield, can be really intense. And so those kinds of situations, you need these glacier glasses with side shields to protect the sides of your eyes from potential snow blindness. So if you're going to a glacier, going to a snowfield, you really don't wear the sunglasses that you would wear to the beach. SPF at least 30, preferably 50, depending on where you're going, some type of sunscreen. It's important to have lip balm to protect your lips. And again, thinking about it from environmental protection, if you're going out in the summertime to an area that's known for bugs, you probably want to have some type of bug repellent. Not necessary maybe in the wintertime if it's below freezing, but certainly necessary in the summertime anywhere around water or potentially where you have bugs. The third and fourth item on the 10 essential systems are illumination and insulation. And let's start with illumination. It's really simple. It is a headlamp with spare batteries. And the reason that I like, or most like, a headlamp is that it gives you hands-free mobility at night when on the trail or setting up camp or whatever. If you're carrying a flashlight, you risk dropping the flashlight, losing the flashlight, potentially dropping it and breaking it. So a headlamp with extra batteries, the third of the 10 essential systems. The fourth is insulation, or what is known as extra clothing. And it's why I like the systems approach, because if you're going to, say, do a day hike in the desert in the summertime versus an overnight in the mountains in the winter, you're going to be different in what you select as your extra clothing. But things that I always bring with me, even in the summertime, because in the Pacific Northwest it gets cool in the evening, some type of an insulation layer, like a down jacket. And I always have waterproofs. So waterproof top and bottom. And if I'm out in the summertime, I will opt for these lightweight options, a lightweight Gore-Tex top and a lightweight Gore-Tex bottom. If I'm going out in the wintertime, I may bring my heavier weight Gore-Tex as a shell garment. I also typically have some type of a stocking cap. You lose a lot of radiation heat through your head, especially when you're in the evening. So a stocking cap is almost as effective as a jacket in terms of overall insulation. A light pair of fleece gloves, and that would really do it. If I'm going out for a day hike, even in the summertime, I may go for a lighter pair of like neoprene or some type of lighter weight glove, but this is the typical assortment that I would take with me for insulation / extra clothing in the summertime. Number 5 and number 6 on the 10 essential systems are the 2 F's, first aid and fire. And so let's talk very quickly about first aid kit. Something that I would typically have with me is this individual size first aid kit that has a selection of bandages, gauze, blister treatments, and a little bit of medication. You can see that I've augmented with 2 pairs of medic gloves. I've also put in extra gauze and extra bandages because trauma injuries are what we're most worried about in the backcountry. If I'm going out for a long distance hike, I may take something smaller like this Adventure Medical Kit's kind of ultralight first aid kit. I use this if I'm going to do long distances like over 20 miles. I don't open it up because it is waterproof. Other things you may think about in your first aid assortment, certainly duct tape. Has a variety of first aid and other utilitarian purposes. Also this Leuco tape. Leuco tape is a sports tape and it is excellent on blisters. A favorite of Pacific Crest Trail hikers. I usually always have a tick remover. You can elect not to use this and use something like a knife, but this is extremely lightweight, weighs less than an ounce, and it's typically always in my kind of pack of essential items. Other things that you may think about for first aid would be a signal device, some type of a whistle. But that does it for first aid. It really is an individual preference, what you want to bring with you and the type of environment that you're going to be in. If you're going to be in an area with poisonous snakes, you may want to have a snake bite kit in your repertoire of medical supplies. But again, that's entirely a personal preference. So the second F is fire. And so what I carry with me for fire is just a few things. I will always carry with me an extra lighter because many times I go out, I have a stove with me. If the striker on my stove fails, I want to have a lighter. So I carry a small Bic lighter in my backpack. Then I carry an extra Bic lighter in my essentials pack, and you can see that it's taped over the top so that I know that this is my spare lighter and I don't use it. Matches in a waterproof container. This has a bit of cotton at the top. These are storm matches, strike anywhere. So these are also a good option to carry with you. They weigh next to nothing. But one thing that I can highly recommend that you can probably put together right now is one of the best fire starters that I've found, and the trick that I've learned in the Mountaineers is to take a cotton ball and soak it or basically coat it in Vaseline. So a cotton ball that is coated in Vaseline is one of the best fire starters available. You can pull some tinder together. You can hit that with a spark, either from a match or a lighter, or even from flint and steel, and it will ignite very readily. Other things that you may see on the market are these magnesium fire starters. They are also very good. You basically shave off some magnesium, which is highly flammable, and when it's hit with a flame, it will help to ignite the tinder. The whole idea in your fire starter is to have enough with you that you can gather tinder together, build a tinder bundle, and start a fire. Wow, we are making progress. So the next items are a repair kit and knife, and I want to talk about those. So as far as a repair kit and knife, things that I will bring with me, if I'm going on a short trip, maybe certainly a day hike, or maybe even a single or double overnight trip, I like this Leatherman Skeletool. It has all the functionality of a regular Leatherman, but it's a little bit lighter, although still weighty. If weight is an issue, if I'm going on a long distance backpacking trip, like more than 20 miles or whatever, I will bring along this small Leatherman Micra. Gives me a pair of scissors for things like cutting bandages, doing small repairs. It also has a knife, a pair of tweezers, and a screwdriver for gear repair. The other knife that I sometimes have with me is my belt knife. This is a Hella knife Temagami, which is named after a town in northeastern Ontario, Canada. So this is a Hella knife, a very good kind of bushcraft knife that's made in Norway. And as far as a repair kit, the only repair kit that I bring other than the repairability of the various tools that I have would be a repair kit for my Thermarest. So if I'm out overnight, I always have my Thermarest mattress with me, and insulating yourself from the ground is critically important for survival. It's also important for comfort. And so I do have this repair kit which will let me fix any small tear or small hole that I have in my blow-up mattress. So that's basically it for knife and repair kit. Extra food is really simple. It's high calorie, low bulk. And so I'll carry extra food in some type of a small stuff sack. But I've talked about some of these things before, but some of the extra food that I like are these Lenny and Larry's cookies. So these have 420 calories in one cookie. I will bring things like a Stroop waffle, these energy blocks from Cliff Bar. These are all things that I would eat normally in the course of hiking or when I'm out burning energy, but they're also extra things that I'll carry in my extra food. So extra food does not include your lunch or your dinner. It's extra food that you have with you in case you have to spend an unplanned night or nights in the backcountry. So getting down to the wire, number 9 and number 10 are extra water and some type of emergency shelter. Extra water. So I will always have with me a quart-size water bottle. This is just a clean canteen metal. I always have water with me, either in something like that or a Nalgene bottle. I do sometimes wear a water bladder, but I don't prefer those. I prefer a bottle. So, but for extra water, most times you don't want to carry the extra water, and depending on where you're going, I always have with me, as an emergency, some type of way to filter water. In the Pacific Northwest, in this area, you can pretty much always find water by going to a valley and finding a creek. And this allows me to treat water. This is a Sawyer squeeze, and it pretty much stays in the bottom of my pack or in the bottom of my outside pocket all the time. It weighs almost nothing, and it's an insurance policy if I ever find myself in need of extra water. The reason you don't want to carry a bunch of extra water is it's heavy. So a filter is a much more logical way to satisfy your requirement for extra water. And so lastly, let's talk about emergency shelters. And emergency shelters can be a variety of things. It starts with something like a survival blanket. I like these by Saul because they are a little more durable than some of the Mylar type thin little emergency blankets that you get that are susceptible to tearing. You can use this as a blanket, but you can also use it as a tarp or even as a tent. It's a tear resistant material that's much better than the cheap Mylar. I wouldn't recommend those for your emergency shelter. Another option would be the small single-use emergency bivvy, or this is a larger Adventure Medical Kits bivvy sack that honestly I very rarely if ever bring with me. So I'm usually always have something like this. If I'm going out in the winter time, I will actually sometimes bring my OR Alpine bivvy, even if I'm not planning on spending the night, because if I do get stuck out in the winter time, I want to be realistic about survival. And so an Alpine bivvy that's designed to protect me from the snow and the elements in the wintertime or whatever season I happen to be out in is a much more comfortable choice for me. But you may even have things like a tarp that you bring along, a lightweight tarp. But having a way to make an emergency shelter is really critical. And it is the last of the 10 essential systems. So that's it, the 10 essential systems. Before I leave you, I would like to just actually introduce some potential 11s, which are communication. So you could argue that communication is part of navigation, but specifically things that you may want to consider depending on your activity and who you're with and what you're doing. Some type of a two-way radio. Your cell phone works great as long as it works, but a cell phone paired with a GPS satellite communication device is an excellent way to communicate. I talked about the compass earlier. Sometimes you may have a compass or a signal mirror, but being able to use a compass and signal an aircraft in a potential rescue is a critical skill to have. And also, if you're going out in the wintertime and you're going to be in avalanche terrain, I would highly recommend always wearing an avalanche beacon. Doesn't do you any good if you're by yourself, but if you're with a partner or a group and you're traveling in avalanche terrain in the wintertime, it's highly recommended that you wear and know how to use an avalanche beacon. So that's it. One other item, if you're traveling in bear country, so in the Pacific Northwest, it's the North Cascades, or the other places in the U.S., the Northern Rockies, maybe parts of California, not for grizzlies, but for black bears. But depending on your level of comfort, you may want to carry with you bear spray. It's not one of the essentials per se, but it is a safety item that you may want to consider bringing along. Do I bring all of this with me and take all of this gear on every outing that I go on? Obviously not. I'm very selective about what equipment I bring with me, and it's really tuned to either the activity or the location that I'm going to. The argument could be made that it's much safer to have a lighter weight pack than it is to have a heavyweight pack that's laden down with all of this safety gear. So I am very selective about what I have with me. I always have one element of the 10 essentials, and if you can make one item work for multiple uses, that's even better, especially when you're trying to conserve weight. So I hope this video was helpful. I hope you got a little bit out of it. If you have things that you use in your 10 essentials, I'd like to hear from you down below. If you have questions about the gear that I have, or how I would prepare for a particular outing, you can certainly ask those questions down below, because I like hearing from everybody. Again, I hope it was helpful. I'd like to thank you for coming along and thank you for listening. I always appreciate a thumbs up if you like the video, and if you want to continue to follow me as a landscape photographer in my hiking and pursuits in nature and in the outdoors, well, at least consider hitting that subscribe button. So until next time, I will see you in the next video.